right, good evening. Oh, we're echoing tonight. Welcome to Town of Rutland, Office of the Select Board. Tonight's regular meeting, it is Monday, August 12th at 6:01 p.m. Hereby call this meeting to order and open it. And could we all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Could I get a motion to sign Treasury Warrant 4 and payroll?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
And let me back up. Please note that as per usual, our meetings are being recorded and will be available transmission on Rutland Public Access TV as well as on YouTube. I think we need to skip March 25th minutes yet again, and you have 2 other sets of minutes in front of you.
Reason being that we don't have a quorum of the people who were on the board at the March 25th meeting.
Yep. So because 2 of the members were remote for July 15th, I'll hold off until our other members arrive. And we can do the 29th, or we can hold all the...
Let's just hold everything.
Okay, let's hold the minutes.
Are we expecting?
Are we expecting both?
They
Yep.
both will be here.
Okay.
They're just both traveling still.
Excellent. All right, we are moving straight on to number 5, public comment. Is there anyone here for general public comment?
Yeah.
Oh,
Folks.
Dick,
I'll speak.
thank you.
One of the things I noticed when I was online, the Board of Assessors GIS, do you know the town common does not show up on the library side, let's say this. But my biggest thing is because we're going to be talking about the new Dunkin' Donuts and all that. We have no idea where the bounds are once you get, beyond Palmagussit Road. There's no more stakes in the, to tell you how wide it is. And also, is it 165 foot, 10 Rod Road, all through from just the side of Glenwood or just before the cemetery? It starts that wide and ends down here near Pleasantdale.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way we can get a map showing the width of the roads for MassDOT?
Did you mention this to Dave yet? The planner?
No,
Yeah.
but
Dick mentioned it to me.
Okay.
And then I talked to Joe, actually, just because we're updating our GIS
Yeah.
system anyway. If you go on the current GIS system, it looks as, if you go to the, just as an example, the Congregational Church or St. Patrick's,
Yep.
the lot line goes straight through rather than denoting the street there in the area for the common there. So it's just a matter of going through and having a survey done to fix that. So it's on our radar, and
so
Joe has a
I
comment on
just
it.
Okay.
heads up on it, and
I mean, do we think it's a mapping error or something that requires professional surveying? I guess that's the question. Joe?
Can I speak?
Yes.
2 quick things. One, I'm pretty confident Mass DOT has a pretty good layout for their roadway. They're sticklers on that kind of thing. So I will gladly contact Mass DOT and get you a set of drawings for District 3.
thank you.
Okay? Regarding the parcel adjustments, that'll have to come with time.
Mhm.
That would require, it may require a survey, but the parcel drawings are based on existing records. So we don't survey everything in town already.
Mhm.
They're drawn from the existing assessing maps.
Mhm.
We can make adjustments as needed, but I guess, so I hope that answers your question.
The first one is the main one.
Yeah, those are easy.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else here for public comment? Name and address, please.
My name is Catherine Tripolo. I'm actually a resident of Barry. Should I go up to the microphone?
Yeah,
Can you
from
hear
back
me
there,
okay
why
here?
don't you?
Okay.
Is there any objection to someone from out of town?
From out of town?
She's from
What's it
Barry.
concerning?
My name is Catherine Tripolo, and I'm from the Caregiver Patient Connection, and we'd like to be considered as an applicant for your host community agreement for a retail adult use establishment in the town of Rutland.
Okay. So you recognize this is just public comment?
Yes.
Okay.
I wanted to let you know that I've dropped off with Mr. Nicholson a second set of papers, just to update where we are in our licensing process for both our cultivation, manufacturing, and we have a retail facility as well. So this would be our second retail facility, and we'd like to be considered by your town. And I've also, a few weeks ago, I gave Mr. Nicholson a list of what we would propose for community benefits for the town. And there's also an overview in there of what our potential building would look like and basically more about us. I didn't include an updated executive summary because that hasn't changed, and I had given that to you in the past, but I'm happy to get it back over to you for the board's review. So I just wanted to introduce myself, and my husband, who's also my business partner, is Dean Iandoli. I grew up in Barry. Dean's a Worcester boy. So,
All right.
anything else?
Sure. Come on up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So my name is Dean Iandoli, now known as the husband of Catherine. So just it's further introduction. Our company CPC, currently in the cannabis industry in Massachusetts, we're operational. In Barry, we're currently cultivating under a Tier 2 license. We've been approved fully by the Cannabis Control Commission. We've been approved for our first retail dispensary in Fitchburg. Like Catherine said, Rutland would be our second. You'll hear from, is it you? Or it's somebody from KP Law tonight about the whole process and how it goes. And you're probably already aware, in order for an applicant to even submit an application to the Cannabis Control Commission, they have to do two things first. They have to receive a host community agreement from the host community, and then they have to conduct a community outreach meeting. So as Catherine said, we're here to be considered once you decide your process for the host community agreement in Rutland. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else here for public comment? General public comment? Hearing none, I am moving on to number 6. We have 2 visitors with us tonight, one of whom is already here. Good thing, because you're listed first. Katie, come on up.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Katie Lockman. I'm an attorney with KP Law Town Council's office, and been invited here this evening to just speak with you a little bit about the host community agreement process. I understand that your community has limited the number of retail facilities that can locate. You've connected that as per the Massachusetts statute to the number of liquor licenses that you have in your community, which means that you have the availability of basically one permit or license to issue. The way that this process has taken place in many communities that have limited their number of licenses, in which there has been more than one applicant interested in receiving that permit, is to establish a process whereby the Board of Selectmen, who is the contracting authority and has the ability to negotiate that host community agreement, does an evaluation of the applicants that are interested and applies a set of criteria and makes a determination as to which applicant they feel would be the best fit for their community. So what I have done this evening is just to sort of get you thinking a little bit about how you might set this process up and how you might conduct that kind of evaluation. Is I've provided you a couple of sample documents of communities that have followed sort of similar processes. So I have given you an example of what was titled a request for qualification in the town of Tingsboro. They had a limit of 2 licenses, and they went through this process using a marijuana subcommittee, which the Board of Selectmen had appointed. It involved the police chief, the former school superintendent, representative of the ZBA, representative of the planning board, and a member of the community at large who took sort of the lead on accepting the information, reviewing the information, and then making a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. Other communities have done that, have sort of eliminated the subcommittee and really just done that as a board themselves. The other example I provided to you was from the city of Worcester, which, it's a larger community. Obviously, they had more licenses to offer, but they put in place what I think is a very simple and straightforward approach for their request for information, which is what they entitled request for interest, I'm sorry, is what they entitled theirs. And then a sort of a set of evaluation criteria for those applicants once they received the submissions. The third document that I provided you this evening is on our KP letterhead, and it really is just sort of a summary of the types of information that many communities have asked applicants to provide up front to sort of get a sense of who they are as an applicant, what their proposal is, what their business plans are, how they're going to benefit the community, what their potential municipal impacts might be. And then at the end of that list is sort of a comparative criteria for evaluation, which are the sort of the general categories of things that you might compare across the various applicants to get a sense of whether or not, which applicant you may favor as a community. The question for the Board of Selectmen in any of these processes in any community is really, what are your goals as a community? What do you favor? What do you value? Certain communities have put a stronger emphasis on what is the potential financial benefit that we could receive. Other communities have said, we really want to open this process to local business owners, people who are connected to our community, who have shown initiative to get involved in this market, who may not be able to compete with sort of the big national companies, but really show an ability to bring jobs to our community, and they're people that we know and are acquainted with. So what your criteria may entail is really a discussion and a policy consideration for the board. The thing that I generally encourage boards to do when they start through this process is to actually put in place and put in writing a set of criteria by which they're going to judge applicants. And the reason being is that when you have multiple applicants and a limited number of licenses to give, you really do want to make sure that you've put in place as fair and impartial a process as you can. So by having that conversation in advance and saying, here's what we value, here are the criteria we're going to judge this by, and once we receive this information, we'll go through that process and decide which applicant we want to proceed and negotiate a host community agreement with. Now, the process of negotiating a host community agreement is sort of the second stage of that. Once you've selected the applicant, then you really put into writing what the terms of that agreement will be. Host community agreements generally have a significant portion of those agreements contain the financial provisions, the financial terms under which you will be receiving some sort of community impact fee or benefit payment from the successful applicant. And then they detail sort of the other commitments and obligations that the applicant agrees to make towards the community. There's a variety of topics that can cover everything from a commitment to local hiring and using local contractors, to particular provisions for security and inspections and overall reporting to the Board of Selectmen, compliance with various terms or provisions that you may decide as a community you would like to see included in these agreements. Certainly the review process of soliciting information from these applicants gives you a sense of who they are, what their impacts might be, and whether or not there are certain things in advance of them opening you would like to see negotiated and put into agreement in advance, so that you get ahead of sort of mitigating some of the community impacts. And certainly I have sample agreements that we've negotiated in other communities, and I'm more than willing to sort of help you through the process of negotiating those contracts once you get to that point. And other than that, really, I'm here to sort of answer any questions you might have about this process, how it's worked in other communities, and just generally any other questions you might have pertaining to the marijuana laws as they currently stand.
Thank you.
Sheila, if I may, just to throw out there too for the members of the board and the public who are here, Commissioner Flanagan had originally planned to be at this meeting from the Cannabis Control Commission. Due to a last-minute thing that came up, she wasn't able to be here, so she sends her regrets. But following the last meeting where this came up under public comment for the board, the question was asked about an RFP type process, which prompted me to call Commissioner Flanagan again, which is where she informed me that the RFI process did exist for this. So then I asked Katie if she could talk about that a little more, which is where this came up from. So that's where that came from, and that's why Commissioner Flanagan isn't here today, just for everyone's aware.
Thank you. Anyone want to get started?
Well, I think it's a good idea. My concern is we've received two kind of proposals now, or detailed information from two separate vendors that would like to be in the community. We have a competitive, obviously a license. In the communities I've worked with prior, we would have an RFP process or an RFQ or an RFI, whatever it's referred to as, depending on what we want to do. We would task a group or a committee. I would recommend letting Mike choose municipal employees as they're appropriate, whether it be the police chief, fire chief, the planner, to set out kind of a list of preferred qualifications that the board would approve. We can go out to bid, kind of have a blind bid process, and then score each applicant individually. Is that similar to kind of what you're referring to in terms of process?
Yes, and so the one distinction I would make is that this does not really follow sort of your traditional 30B process. This is more of an informal sort of request for qualifications or request for proposals. So because 30B does not apply, you're not under sort of the same strictures that typically apply in that process. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a blind review. Certainly I recommend having a list of criteria, but the overriding criteria should be sort of the board's determination of what it deems to be in the best interest of the community.
Right.
So knowing what you know of Rutland, you mentioned two options, one being a subcommittee
Mm-hmm.
named by the board, majority members already employees, to Mitch's point, with one at-large. Is it something you would recommend in our case? You sort of presented it as a 50-50, whichever the community wants.
Yes, so it really has to do sort of with the length of the process. Once you appoint a subcommittee, certainly there's an ability to make, if there's a couple of ways communities have done this. I'll back up a step. Some communities have sort of delegated this authority to your town administrator, working with legal counsel, maybe with a liaison from the Board of Selectmen. That is a very facile process because it's not really a subcommittee that needs to convene in the same way under the open meeting law, but they always report back to the board, and the board has final approval, and there's discussion in open meeting of whatever proposals they make. Some communities have the board doesn't necessarily have enough bandwidth to handle this process themselves, so they do appoint a subcommittee. That subcommittee is subject to the open meeting law. They meet in the evenings. They follow an open meeting law process, very transparent. It does take more time to get that sort of up and running and have those reports go back and forth. So I have seen in smaller communities where the board really does sort of want to manage this process, but simply wants town administration to help them through that process, to have sort of legal counsel, town administrator, maybe a liaison from the board, sort of work to get that up and running with the board then sort of approving the final document. So in a community of your size, that might be an easier approach than starting a whole subcommittee process.
I guess another follow-up, and Mitch mentioned it, we proactively received two applications of varying content. Those were obviously unsolicited. We basically walked away from a town meeting vote without a post process in place for it having gotten approved. And so, again, knowing that and not necessarily knowing anything else, is there a particular process that you would recommend?
Yeah. So most communities in which the board is negotiating the host community agreement, much like you are, this is not something that goes to town meeting. You don't need a bylaw in place to establish what your procedure and your policy is going to be for determining who you're going to negotiate a host community agreement with. So the board really can sort of either, as a board at a public meeting, have this discussion, or you can, have the town administrator go away, come back and make a proposal, and sort of move forward in that regard. So given that you've come off a town meeting vote, this is the typical next step for most communities. We have a limitation on our number of licenses. How are we going to make that decision? And how are we going to solicit the most number of applicants? You've had two unsolicited, proposals. That doesn't mean that there's not potentially more out there. If you sort of say, here's our policy, here's our process, here's our timeline, you may see some other interested entities come forward and make proposals, in which case you have sort of a broader pool to decide from.
So this was initially approved back in November. Is there a typical timeline where we would set a deadline, to your point of maybe there are more out there and we're going to be looking for more competition to take our single license?
I think the next step is to establish what your review policy is going to be, what your application criteria are going to be, and what your evaluation criteria are going to be. Sort of two steps: application and then evaluation. Once you've established that process, generally it's sort of a 30-day application period in which anybody who's interested is able to put together their proposals. You have received some already, but they may not include all of the information that you're interested in having, so it gives them an opportunity to supplement so that you're evaluating, across the board sort of equal information.
Okay.
And then anybody else who's interested can also submit a completed application within that sort of 30-day window.
So the visual I'm getting is that the active unsolicited applicants are sort of in a holding pattern until the town has all of its ducks in a row as far as its process moving forward.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Because not everyone here got a copy of the people watching and stuff. There are some things that the board could request on the request that it puts out if we choose to do that. That aren't full public record, like a security plan and things like that. That does remain confidential and privileged, right?
That's right, and you certainly can specify that on your request for submissions if there are things that might otherwise fall under a protected public records exemption. For example, you don't necessarily want a full security plan to be disclosed to the public, sort of defeats the purpose of having a security plan. You can require information or the more confidential parts to be withheld, and then you can confidentially submit to your police chief for review and comment on whether or not they have any issues or concerns with what has been proposed, and that can come back to you in the form of some sort of report.
Is this list that you gave us, would you consider it comprehensive and we should pick and choose from it, or would you consider it a starting point?
It's reasonably comprehensive. I would encourage you to look at the list and then sort of think of yourself as a community as to, are there special things that make your community unique? Is there something specific about the way you drafted your zoning that may inform how these applications are considered and what is like your
what?
buffer zones or particular security concerns or odor concerns if you're looking at cultivation operations or things like that.
So that sounds specific to a site,
Mm-hmm.
and that would factor into an applicant's. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
What's the deadline? I mean, when do we need to make a decision on this?
You approved your zoning in November of last year,
Mhm.
and you've received these two applications in the course of the last couple of months.
Yeah.
You need to be actively moving towards approval. I wouldn't sit on this for too long. I would, in the next, do you meet every other week?
Correct.
This is sort of a policy consideration for you as to how you want to set up the process, but most communities that are doing an RFI type process, I have typically seen sort of a 3-month period in which they meet established criteria, accept applications, and then make a determination.
Start to finish, 3 months.
3 to 4 months.
So that's almost like even pushing it, that's December 31st for us, if I basically throw out August, because we only have one more meeting left in August.
And of that 3 months, 1 month of that is just the application collection period.
Sure. Yep. So sort of a month to get together your what your criteria is going to be and approve it, a month to solicit applications, and then a month to sort of evaluate and approve an applicant, give or take a few weeks.
And then Rutland gets pot for Christmas.
So September.
Then you negotiate a host community agreement. You get pot for next Christmas.
So September for the document.
Yeah.
October for the made public. People can
Yeah.
respond
And November for the evaluation.
for the
and award.
evaluation. December is the overlap. Okay. That sounds really like what we needed. This
Mhm.
sort of very clear roadmap
Yeah.
of how to proceed.
Well, and I think you have the benefit of a number of communities that have sort of gone through this process ahead of time. So, we're not reinventing the wheel here. You're sort of looking at what some other communities have done. You consider it in light of your own local concerns. And I think I'm more than happy to help assist with putting together.
I think we need help with objectivity. So for example, out of all of the criteria that you've provided to us, and by the way, anybody can have a copy of this tonight if they want to take a look at it.
Yeah, we have extras too.
How do you score them? Are they weighted? You know, how do you end up coming to a decision? You say, well, based on the criteria that we set, this was a very clear decision, or it was a close decision, but in the end,
Yeah.
the scoring was clear and objective.
I mean, can we come up with like an allocation system, like highly advantageous, advantageous,
Exactly. Yeah.
like
Okay.
a normal RFP process would go through? I mean,
Yeah.
it seems to me like it would best serve our community if we followed it like it was a normal RFP process, knowing that we have a little bit of flexibility in terms of how we handle it. Is that correct, or?
Yes, and you will notice, so the examples I gave you don't have that highly advantageous.
Can we
I
do
have
that
a
with
couple
the-
of examples of other communities that did follow that path.
Great.
And, you know, I didn't want to overwhelm you. Some of those were pretty
late.
detailed
Could you
proposals,
forward that
so-
to Mike so that we could have a copy
Sure,
of that?
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I can show you, you know, sort of how some communities wrote those narratives of what would be highly advantageous.
Yeah.
And I think when we spoke earlier on the phone, the reason why we went with Worcester and Tingsboro as the examples that we presented tonight was Worcester's proposal, or RFI, is very simple and request kind of just the bare minimum, where Tingsboro took it the extra mile and a half. So we've got the two bookends, but seeing that in between, I can see that. That's why we went
I
with
can
those two
provide
for
more
example,
extreme
yeah.
examples too if you really want. But
Well-
what I have found in those communities that have put out very, very comprehensive RFQs is that they're simply overwhelmed with the information they receive back from the applicants. And it's challenging to compare, you know, 1,200 pages of submissions from 4 different applicants. So I think part of this process is sort of saying, well, what are the things that we value the most, and how can we put in place sort of the top 10 things that we care most about in terms of evaluation criteria, and really zone in on those particular issues, such that we do our due diligence as a community, but we don't create unnecessary work and expense for the town and for the applicants, honestly.
That's what our function is as government. Unnecessary work and expense.
I heard you say you gave us sort of extremes. Are there communities out there that are close to our setup that have already seen this process through?
Yes. So there are definitely several communities that have issued host community agreements like a year or more ago, using this type of a process.
Okay. Did you have more questions?
No, I would rather have more information than less.
Yeah.
I mean, this is kind of a, I don't want to say hot button issue. It's still a federally illegal substance. I would rather see somebody be able to provide documentation of having all their ducks in a row.
Go overboard and
Right,
score it.
but I would also rather have, to be honest, I would rather put this in the hands of our more than capable town staff versus the select board in terms of the actual scoring and evaluation. I'd rather throw that in Mike's court to be as to who should be on that committee, what they bring to the table, because we have staff that have kind of worked around some of these issues before that maybe we don't have as much experience with. That would be, if we're having an open conversation about it, the way that I think that when I used to deal with some of these, not this issue, but RFPs in the city of Worcester, we would put together teams of internal staff that would handle this. I think that's the best and most equitable way to do it, but I'm more than willing to listen to any conversation the board has.
Do you feel like we can work that into our first 30 days? So basically, we're setting the criteria, and we would then hand those criteria off to a committee of Mike and a group of his choosing.
Yeah.
And then after that, you know, and I'm still playing with these dates in my head, that October 31st deadline, what would we do at that point? The team would take November to review and present it to the board in December. And so that would that's hitting us with that extended sort of fourth month a little bit, but.
And certainly, you know, any deadlines you sort of set for yourself are not, you know, they're not
Hard deadlines.
statutory, they're
Yeah.
not even regulatory. They're goals and benchmarks to try and meet. And certainly, you know, if you end up needing more time, you're not under any sort of legal threat of somebody coming in and being able to claim constructive approval like you would in a zoning process or something where you have statutory deadlines for processing permitting.
Right.
Certainly, you want to be moving towards selection of an applicant because you have allowed it in your community, and they do. The host community agreement really is the barrier to entry, and I always advise communities that they need to be careful not to use a host community agreement as a tool to prohibit somebody from coming in. But certainly having this conversation and moving forward in this process is sort of that step towards really effectuating the zoning that you passed and the ability of applicants to locate within your community.
So I'm going to ask this question. I might regret it. It might be a hard answer. As you started with, our structure is set that we tied the number of licenses we have available to the number of liquor licenses we have. At some point, that number may change. Obviously, the big 2020 census is coming up. Our liquor license number may change. In the interim, have any communities looked back and said, and you started to answer this before the meeting began, looked back and said, we should have put more structure in and set more limitations, or vice versa in our case, should we have not tied this to our liquor licenses, and should we have been a little bit more flexible with our numbers?
So the tying of this to the liquor license is really something that was a creation of the statute, the legislation that was passed, and it gave municipalities the ability to set limitations.
Right.
And the reason that communities have set them in relation to their liquor license is because that was sort of the threshold that was established in the statute, whereby if you went below a certain threshold, you needed to have a ballot question in order to pose a more strict limitation, whereas if you capped it at 20% or higher, you didn't need a ballot question to impose that limitation. Communities that have set it at 20% or higher, I mean, there's going to have to be, generally in communities of this size, it's unlikely that you're going to see, even with a census, something that shifts your liquor licenses so far from where it is now that it results in an additional license. But that's not to say that as a community you can't make a decision to change your limitation and to allow more facilities. I think that many communities sort of started with that, set it at 20% because that was a way to sort of control the rollout and to sort of see what the impacts are, and to gradually allow these companies to come in the community and then make a determination down the road if they want to loosen up that limitation. So I have not seen any communities increase that limit right now, because I think the industry is still very, very new. I mean, we only have 22 stores open in Massachusetts right now. There's a long queue for approval through the CCC. Over close to 500 host community agreements have been signed in Massachusetts at this point in time. So there are a lot of companies that are still working their way through both the state licensing and the local licensing process. So it will be a little while before we really feel the effects of this industry having sort of been open, fully rolled out, and functioning in communities. So starting slow is the way a lot of communities have opted to go. Okay.
And I should have prefaced that by saying that for the audience, that was obviously not a board decision. That would be a zoning bylaw change with a very high 2/3 bar at a town meeting. I think I asked it because, unsolicited, we did get only 2 applications. And I don't know how other people in town felt, but I think there was certainly a feeling that Rutland has not necessarily been super successful in recent years in attracting commercial business. And so when this passed, it was hard for anybody to know if people were going to be knocking down our door. And so now sitting there with 2, not 20, but 2, I guess, you have to ask the questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any questions from the public?
Sure.
Sean Moore, 3 Edson Avenue. The Cannabis Control Commission has set out certain guidelines for municipalities as pertaining to community impact payments, being only of 3% on top of the 3% tax that a town can bring in. Can you go into more about that?
You want to address this?
Yes, please.
So under the statute, community impact fees are permitted as part of the host community agreement. The statutory cap on community impact fees is 3% of gross sales. There is an additional 3% that municipalities collect as a tax, and that is through the acceptance, which I believe you have done, of 64N, which allows that tax to be collected via DOR and then reimbursed to the community. There's often confusion over sort of these two numbers because they're both 3%. The community impact fee is a contractual obligation, and it is paid to the community directly, whereas the tax obviously goes through DOR. Some communities, 3% is the cap. Some communities have negotiated agreements that are less than 3%. The point of the community impact fee is it's a mitigation payment and really intended to reimburse communities for the impacts that they feel as a result of these companies locating and operating within their town. They have a 5-year limitation, and at the end of that period, if you want to renegotiate a community impact fee, the community will really need to quantify what its impacts were and be able to demonstrate those costs in order to sort of continue an agreement that reimburses them at that same rate. If you follow the media at all on host community agreements, there are a number of communities that, in addition to a community impact fee, have had companies come before them and voluntarily offer to make additional payments or charitable or nonprofit contributions to the community as an additional benefit payment.
Like the mafia?
Would you not, well, couldn't a town,
Just,
if I may,
you may.
through the chair,
Thanks.
couldn't, to have a company, I think one of the reasons why the Cannabis Control Commission capped it at 3% was to stop companies from coming in and saying, I'll build you a new fire station, or I'll donate so much to your general funds or to your nonprofit organizations, to stop that, because couldn't it be considered as a bribe if a company was to come in and say, I'll give $30,000 to your general funds straight off the top, and you're a mega million company, how can a local small business compete with something like that? So that's why the Cannabis Control Commission said no more a company, and this is in their community guidelines for municipalities, which I'm sure that they have, the select board has copies of, and I'm sure you have copies of as well, to stop that. So can you address on that?
So, just as a point of legal clarification, the Cannabis Control Commission is not regulating host community agreements. They are not reviewing them. They don't require the agreement to be submitted to them. They are not passing judgment on the terms of those agreements. The statute...
Guidelines.
Mr. Moore.
Accepting. If
Mr.
I
Moore,
may.
she needs to finish
Okay,
what
yeah,
she's
please
saying.
go on.
Okay.
The Cannabis Control Commission has issued guidelines for municipalities. They're not regulations. I would simply state to this board that of the 500 host community agreements that have been negotiated, the Cannabis Control Commission did do a review of a number of those agreements and determined that more than half of them did include some sort of community benefit payment.
The voluntary payment you just talked about?
The additional payment beyond the 3%.
Okay.
There is a lot of legal debate right now between municipalities and industry as to whether or not the statute authorizes or prohibits those types of payments. That is an unresolved legal issue. There is legislation currently pending that is being addressed by the Joint Cannabis Subcommittee to consider some clarifying language for the laws as written to address these issues. But as with any issue, there are really two sides to that interpretation, and certainly communities. I will just say there has been no lawsuit to this point in time by anybody challenging agreements that include these benefit payments. It is a local. It's a local policy consideration for you as a board to make as to whether or not you choose to look at sort of strict interpretation of that statutory language, or whether if you have applicants that come before you and indicate a willingness to pay, something additional, whether you want to entertain those kinds of offers. Again, this puts you back in this policy territory of what are you valuing, what are you looking at when you evaluate these agreements. One of the biggest debates right now certainly is the ability of small local business to compete with the types of larger companies that often come before communities and make these kinds of payment offers in order to sort of get a leg up in this process. So again, these agreements exist. There's been no judicial determination at interpreting the law as currently stands with respect to whether or not those payments are in compliance, but certainly these are considerations that are out there that many communities are grappling with.
So, Sean, I know you had a follow-up. I just want to ask, to that point, and having us just asked about the way to structure as objective a process as possible, do most communities list this very voluntary
Like,
on
can
their
we-
structure?
Can we
don't
say,
know.
for example, the board needs a Mercedes
Well,
to go back and forth between meetings? Maybe we include that as part of the.
Maybe this is just systemic in a brand new industry where it is clear that profits are very high, right? It's a brand new industry and it's growing very fast. And I know we have a lot of questions. So maybe this is par for the course in a new industry, but obviously we're all in uncharted waters here. So it's a fair, do you say, okay, well, this company has deep pockets and they can do this. However, this company, I don't know how that's apples and oranges.
Yeah.
How do you compare that?
It's a very, I think that's where you sort of get into what is it, once you know sort of what the legal options are, what do you value, and where are you going to put your weight as a board behind sort of those various considerations. I would like, just as a point of clarification, because municipalities that have these provisions, and I have worked with many of these communities, I would just like to say that they go into these agreements definitely as a negotiation in good faith, and that the majority of these payments that are made are often earmarked specifically for things like substance abuse and mental health services, opioid addiction, things that arguably are related to impacts of having an increased sort of a substance availability in communities, but which may not be easily quantifiable under a community impact fee as a direct impact in your community as a result of one particular establishment locating within the community. So often what we're seeing is sort of $5,000 to $10,000, sometimes even $20,000 annually being offered to the community to say, we recognize that some of these impacts may not be directly quantifiable. We understand that they still are impacts. And so as a way of showing that we are, behind supporting these kinds of issues within your community, we will make payments for these particular purposes, education in high school and middle school, things like that. So it's not a Mercedes for the select board, it's generally, no, I understand. But having negotiated these agreements in many communities, I just want to sort of put out there that there is certainly a media dialogue that paints a negative picture, but the reality on the ground is often that these communities have companies that come forward and offer to make payments to address sort of a shortfall between what is a quantifiable impact and an unquantifiable impact.
Chair, can I, or do you want to go?
No, I just have one follow-up, and then you go, and then if Sean wants to go. To your point again about the money, I'm noticing on the Tingsboro, and I might have missed it in Worcester, Tingsboro asks for a bid deposit.
Yeah, that has not necessarily been the norm. It
Okay.
is certainly in their
Okay.
agreement. Yeah.
It looked unusual to me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess to kind of what you're talking about, not that this is a question, and it's not necessarily directed at you, but I know that the monies have been used in a lot of cases in a lot of communities, these superfluous payments to go towards substance abuse, police, fire, education. It still concerns me, though, that, we as a state, the state has brought forth a lot of initiatives to try to empower small businesses or minority and women-owned businesses or businesses that are owned by historically disadvantaged people, veteran-owned businesses, things like that, and startups, right? Those aren't the types of businesses that are going to have the money to make that voluntary payment. And it kind of goes against the grain as to, I feel like, a lot of what the state has put forth in terms of policy. And in that regard, I'm very upset and disappointed by the Cannabis Control Commission and the way that they've handled kind of these things. I mean, it disappoints me to hear that 50% of the communities that have reached these agreements have included payments. So you're going to have, as part of this process, potentially a larger company from out of this region come in to want to set up shop, that we're not going to have a direct connection with the owners. We're not going to have a direct connection with perhaps the employees or the industry as a whole. And it's just disappointing that communities are going in that direction, because it seems to be the antithesis of what the administration and what the state has been trying to do from a business perspective for some time now.
And I'm certainly not here to inform policy. I'm really just here to sort of
And that
lay
wasn't
out
directed-
what the
right.
options are for communities and what the various considerations are. Certainly, some communities that have these benefit payments have negotiated a lower community impact fee as a lower percentage, with then sort of an ongoing contribution in the benefit payment area that sort of survives the 5 years, but the initial upfront community impact fee is correspondingly reduced. So there are various ways to structure those payments based on how you want to think about and approach this, and I'm simply sort of putting the options out there for your consideration.
It definitely makes it less subjective. And I'm hearing what you're saying, Mitch. And then on the other side, we're in a community that did not unanimously support marijuana. We still have a lot of people in town who are very suspicious, cautious, concerned about a business like that coming into town.
Sure.
And I agree to the point of, I don't like having a town put in a position where we're going to make this decision between what might be financially better for us in terms of what you're talking about, some of these essentially indirect charges that are going to come from whatever, extra police needs or who knows what that's going to be, traffic control, versus taking and supporting a local or minority-owned business. So that's a disheartening decision to have to make. It does get us away from that objectivity, because you're saying we're making this. It's a judgment call now.
Yeah.
What do you like better? What's better for the town? Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
I apologize. Go.
No, I guess just an ending. I would hope that the select board or any members that if they do form a committee, will look at all the options and hopefully try to keep big business out and locally owned businesses in. Hopefully someone that lives in the community and, it's part of the community to help keep it in the community.
I think through the chair, if we had that public comment period, I think we'll be able to hear from the people in the public as to what kind of business, if any, they want to see in this community, if that's the way we're headed. I would also suggest, too, that if, depending on how the board feels, when we put together our competitive criteria, we could put in, an extra allocation for advantageous for regionally owned or minority owned or, some sort of small business preference that would make a more advantageous proposal if that's the direction the board wants to go in.
Yeah, it's two of the criteria here too, right? You have it listed.
It's something to consider, but certainly the payment thing, I mean, that's, again, when you're talking about equity in the community, that's really, it puts a lot of businesses in an unfair position, and I'm disappointed that that's how the state is managing this process and they're allowing that to go on. That being said, I understand it's divisive too. I mean, it's a federally illegal substance and we receive federal funds, so it's going to be tough.
Where is public comment in all this, assuming what you heard of a rough schedule that we have in our...
Did we talk about public?
No, what was mentioned before was if there's a seated committee of members of the public, then it'd be fall under the open meeting law, which would then the public could attend.
Then the public could attend.
But if it's me with some department heads, that's a working group conversation.
Even if we had department heads, though, could we have a public info session on this to gather public feedback prior to you making an award decision?
I don't know why you can't. I would think it would be invaluable.
I mean, it
Absolutely.
would be good during October, right? We're taking applications and at the same time concurrently taking comments from the public as to what they would like to see for a business that is coming.
Mm-hmm.
Or
some
perhaps
form.
it could inform your criteria, in your
Yeah.
evaluation criteria before you
Oh.
accept applications.
Oh.
That's a great idea as
Yeah.
well.
Okay.
And that certainly could be part of the process of you as a board sort of finally signing off on what that application process looks like. It could be part of your meeting in which you
Yep.
solicit public comment and finalize
I think
the
in a lot
review
of ways,
criteria.
if I may, it's more valuable to have it before we,
Yep.
in the early stages, so that way we're kind of forming a package based on public comment versus trying to then hear the public has gone a completely different direction than what the board was thinking or the subcommittee or whatever was thinking, and then trying to retrofit how are we gonna.
Right. So then it's just how do we hit the greatest cross-section? Is this worth a survey monkey, something that can be extrapolated out to the biggest percentage of people quickly? Somebody has to write the questions.
Well, I would, maybe we could do a mailing for a public hearing. I don't know how many folks would respond to a Survey Monkey. You're just gonna get a certain population that's tech savvy or that has access to those tools that,
I can't
You
remember
know.
the last time the town did a mailing. I'm not saying we can't, I just can't, I can't remember the last time we did a mass town mailing for anything. Do you, Skip?
I didn't hear what you said.
I can't remember the last time this town did a town-wide mailing, that the town paid for it. I don't remember doing it ever. I'm not saying we couldn't, I'm just saying it would be,
I remember a couple years ago on the town census, there was a questionnaire about, I think,
Oh, yeah.
marijuana, but that was lumped in with,
is
Right.
lumped in with everything else.
right, with
Right.
the town census, that
Right.
then could be returned with the town census versus,
There was nothing
Yeah.
done separately.
right,
and Peter's behind the curtain, but he would be able to tell us the percentages of the return on that.
yeah.
Okay. I could, yeah.
And just to clarify, but in case anyone thinks of it between now and then, that's not something that falls under the things that we can put in a tax bill mailing. So
Oh.
we can only put certain things in a tax bill mailing, and this would not fall under that.
Fair enough. Okay. I mean, we could do the town-wide email.
Mm-hmm.
We could, it's really not the use for reverse 911 at all. I think public safety would have an issue with that,
Yep.
and I don't blame them. Okay, sorry, we're thinking, is there anything major that we're missing asking you? Again,
I think
knowing
you've asked excellent questions. I mean, the one thing I would sort of encourage the board to do is maybe talk about what you want the process to look like going forward, so that if you want to, get this moving and give some direction to staff or
Yeah.
administration as to how you want it, the next steps you want to take, that would sort of start your process rolling.
Through the chair, maybe we can kick off that conversation with, maybe we can have Mike put together a team of what he would envision as the review committee. I think if we want to have the public give a chance to weigh in prior to us putting together our selection criteria,
Yep.
we can get the ball rolling on having a public hearing for that.
Yep.
And then we could set a date for where we want to have the selection criteria, the preferred criteria included, that Mike can issue an RFI or an RFQ out for receiving bids.
Okay, so I don't want to push this too much.
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume we start right after Labor Day. What are we looking at for a public information session? Has to be in the month of September.
Yep.
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of creating a committee, like Mitch was saying, I can get that for the next meeting. Setting the public information session, we just need a 2-week posting for that. So that would put us, if we gave the okay to that at the next, and no, it's not a minimum 2-week, it's just that's what if it was a public hearing, it would be
Right.
2 weeks, so I feel like we should follow a similar process.
Okay.
If we did that at the next meeting, we're looking at the second week of September. for
Just
that.
make sure everybody's back from school and vacation,
Yeah.
so that we can get maximum participation.
Yeah.
Right.
Our last water sewer hearing was attended by, I think, like 8 people.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure we
They're here.
maximize, and they're all here. We want to make sure that we maximize the use of everyone's time, but also that we can get as many people out that would want to participate in this as we can, so that, a year or two, whatever it is from now, they don't drive by Main Street and see something and say, where was I when this was going on?
Well, school's back in 2 weeks, so.
Yeah, school's 28th. So, Mike, is it too much for you for our meeting on the 26th to have your team
Nope, that's fine.
and a draft document for us to review relative to criteria based on what Katie's been able to give us, and it sounds like you're sending us some more. so draft.
Yeah.
We could schedule a September public information session on either a regular meeting night or an off night. Our next regular meeting is September 9th. And then, the only other one is the 23rd.
Do it on the 23rd.
Sounds good. That timeline all sounds reasonable with my.
Okay, so the only
idea
issue,
of things.
and again, to Katie's point, we're kind of like rushing ourselves, we don't have to, but just to try to keep some semblance of a timeline, if we do the 23rd for the info session, that means that we would then reconvene our next meeting, now we're into October 7th, which I actually think is the 8th, that might be the holiday weekend.
Yes.
Or maybe not. Yeah, it might be. To finally set the criteria. That puts our 30 days into the first week of November. 30 days post.
Oh, okay, yes.
Right?
Yep.
First week of November, that would give you right through kind of the first week of December for the internal review. And then it would come to us in December.
Mhm.
Does that sound?
Yeah.
Do we sound like we're making sense?
Sounds very reasonable.
Really? Okay.
Well, should
I
we-
think having it out before, sorry, Jen.
No.
I think having it, the RFI, RFQ, RF whatever, out before the holidays makes sense. So to try to get it out, even if it's the second half of October, that then the 30 days closes at or right around Thanksgiving at the latest, then it makes the evaluation process and stuff on our side a little bit
Yeah.
more hectic, but
Yeah. So the
It
majority of it
closes.
is October.
yeah.
Yep.
Well, in terms of valuation, the board's going to have a limited, I would imagine.
Right, no, but I mean, for Mike and
Yeah.
his team,
Yep. For
like,
the staff,
I mean,
right.
us as the town, not as
Yep.
us, the 5 of us sitting here.
Should we vote on the delegation for Mike to run with this? Is it something that requires a board vote? To pass it over to Mike?
I don't think so.
If we want to play it safe, we could. I
Yeah.
don't think we, but
Yeah.
It's the way we don't have a charter, so it probably would.
wouldn't hurt.
Wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
To allow Mike to set up a committee for the review of proposals.
With
Can
the
I
max-
ask for clarification, sorry, is this the committee thinking like the full subcommittee that's open meeting law and everything, or
This is
the
Working
smaller?
This is
Mike
internal
group?
review
Working
team.
group.
internal.
Okay.
It's just part of their regular function as
I
employees.
just wanted to clarify because subcommittee to me means
Yeah.
open meeting law
Yeah, no.
and everything was more of a review team versus.
Yeah.
No, we're
it's
basically
not a
giving,
subcommittee.
basically going to give
Yeah.
Mike permission to set up this
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
team for himself.
that was my clarification.
Is anybody looking to structure this team, or are you going to let him
No,
go?
I'm very comfortable with just delegating Mike to.
Thank you.
You want to set a max? Are we good with that? We're
No, I
gonna-
think Mike handle it.
All right.
See?
All right.
Job done.
Could you restate your motion?
Okay. Motion to allow the town administrator to put together an internal review team that will review received requests for the license allocation for a marijuana dispensary.
A second.
Great. Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Katie, just real quick, just for
We have
public who's watching, the normal 30-day period, business days or calendar days?
Would generally be calendar days when you're
Yeah.
talking about
Yep.
something in that duration.
That's what I figured. I just wanted to clarify with
Yeah.
the public watching.
Certainly.
So.
Never know what questions we might come up with. Question.
No comment, actually. I think that
Name and address.
Marilyn Sidoti, 48 Glenwood Road. Your motion was just for a dispensary, I believe I heard.
The motion was just for Mike to set up a team of employees.
To do what, though?
Set up a
Look
working
into a dispensary in town, I think you said?
I think
This is for the single
Sorry.
retail
Yeah.
license. I apologize.
adult
used the
use
wrong
retail
word.
license, yeah.
I'll amend my motion to reflect retail
Thank
license.
you.
Thank you. Who seconded? Are you okay with the second?
Yeah, yep.
All in
Fine.
favor with the amended motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Thank you.
Apologies.
For the point of order.
Sure.
We're not missing anything else. Do we have any more questions? Questions?
You know how to reach me.
Thank you so much. Oh, wait, we have a late question.
I got a comment.
Name and address.
Willard Cannon, Fernwood Drive. I think we're pushing it, we're being a little bit aggressive on the timeline. We don't, there's a lot of people in town that don't have emails and so on and so forth. would want to have some input on this. And I think we're pushing it a little bit much. I think we ought to have a couple of information sessions to give everybody an opportunity to attend if they wish.
I understand your point, through the chair. I would like to maximize as much public participation as we can because this is such a delicate issue. I'm wondering how flexible, I know we want to move quick, but I'm wondering how flexible that timeline is. How do we feel about that?
Well, I'm wondering about Mr. Cannon's concerns. What we could do is have the September 23rd meeting primarily focused on how we're going to structure the criteria. There could be another one in October while we are waiting for applicants to come in. So that 30-day point where people can comment just on the process and have another information session where we're talking about how this is moving forward and where we're headed. I do think, Mr. Cannon, based on what we're hearing from Katie, I'm sitting here even thinking about a fast track process. When would they open their doors? Knowing where we are today, when would a possible store open their doors?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because there's a lot of things dependent on that. Is this going to be a new facility built from the ground up? Are they going to existing building? What is the local permitting process? How long will it take at the CCC?
Yep.
I mean, part of the questions you can ask an applicant is what is their estimated, development timeline and some communities value someone who can get up and running faster or, so.
Are we seeing a timeline of the applications coming out of CCC?
It really is
varying.
It really varies. And like I said, there are only 22 stores open.
And 500,
with 500
in the queue.
That's
now those are cultivation and product manufacturing, and I mean that's like all types. It's not just retail.
And they're handling them concurrently, not one at a time, and then
So each committee meeting has a certain number of applicants that get heard for provisional approval and then for final approval, and there's a significant inspections process. And
I mean, what we really could do is make sure this is open to the public every month of the process. So September 23rd is our real official public information session. October, continue on with more questions. November, we invite the public to come back, ask questions at the same time that you would be presenting your committee's findings. And then when we decide in December, we'll be having another open meeting. So it's actually 4 open meeting options for the public to comment. And we really could do something online as well to cover all of our bases. The people who want to come in person, the people who want to reply via snail mail, email, whatever mail they want to use, Pony Express.
If I may, the one thing I would encourage the board to do is to have your evaluation criteria and your application criteria set before you receive applications. You want the applicants to know what that application process is and what your criteria is before they do their submission.
Yep.
So what do we do with the ones we already have?
We just
they haven't really technically been submitted because you
resubmit.
haven't. They're really just in a holding pattern.
Okay.
Yeah,
And they're going to resubmit in accordance with your criteria with full knowledge of what your evaluation is going to look like.
And the ideal situation would be that they've gotten some of their legwork out of the way and it's really just a cut and paste. Yeah. Okay.
And they can address additional concerns we bring up through our evaluation criteria.
Yep. Does that help, Mr. Cannon? We'll make sure it's public every month as well as that. Okay. Okay. All right. We're good?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you all. Our next person under presentations is not here.
Yes.
Did
I
he
can
email you?
He did not.
Okay,
but
well,
I
we're
can
going to
give
move
you a
on.
run.
We'll move on.
Okay.
You depart. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
We'll see if he shows up.
We've been stood up.
We've been stood up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's all you. Department updates.
All right. For department updates, we have no departments here at this time, but I can give you the town administrator.
We have one department head here, but I don't think he's here for an update, correct?
I did have a couple items at the back end of the agenda, but I can give you a brief update if like a break from what you were discussing.
Were they related to items at the end of the agenda, or are they separate? It's a list.
No, no, not really, but it's all right.
Yeah, go ahead if you.
All right, I'll let Mike go. Okay.
Sure, okay. Just a couple quick things, not much at this one. We received an invitation from Haywood Hospital and Haywood Health Alliance. They're doing their annual Ride for Your Life motorcycle run for suicide prevention awareness. They actually ride through town each year. So if you see a bunch of motorcycles on Sunday morning going through town, or see why the fire department has the large flag up over Main Street, that's the reason why. So they let us know that they are still planning on coming to town, through town, like they do every year on that one. The dispatch center received a substantial grant from the Office of Public Safety, upwards of close to $100,000, mainly for capital equipment that they've been looking to get for quite some time, particularly with the addition of Warren. This is a grant that we had received a couple times in the past, but it's not one that we receive every year. So it may have an effect on the assessment, it may not, but where it's one-time money, we're weighing out just using it for the capital issues that are there. But that's a discussion that's ongoing that we'll update you on when we're there. But since we got it, we figured we'd tell you, since I told you that we'd let you know when we got grants.
Thank you, and thank Mike for the work to go into that.
All the mics.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mike put a lot of work into that too. Mike Moriarty, just continuing with him, has also set up a meeting recently with the school principals and representatives of the school department to see if we were to put security cameras up in addition to what the school just got awarded through their grant application, what that would entail and what the average cost would be. If you remember, when we were looking at the Springtown meeting warrant, there was a very, very substantial item there. After speaking with the vendors responded, oh, well, we thought that we were under a tight timeline, so we made sure that there was extra fat in there in case there were any contingency costs that we couldn't plan. So now that we have time to go forward, we're trimming off that fat and realizing there's substantial things that were in there as very extra cost. But what we want to do is get it down to exactly what it would cost to go through that specific security upgrade for the town-owned buildings and the school department. Particularly now that half of the cameras that we were putting in the schools are being covered by the grant that the school department got. So that's ongoing as well. But if you see a change in number, that's why. We can get more specific down to the penny numbers on that. There'll be some information sent to the board members in the coming weeks regarding what the procedure is for a dangerous dog hearing. We received a complaint that's currently being investigated by our animal control officer, and the next step would be to come before the board to have a hearing on the dog attack that will be there. But until that is set, it's just a possibility that's coming, but we want to make you aware of what the procedure would be anyway. And then the last thing that I have here is I received a call from Melissa Dunn, who is the CEO of the AED Foundation. The AED Foundation is a overdose awareness, prevention, and education foundation. AED stands for the initials of Melissa's daughter, Alyssa, who passed away of an overdose. So she made this foundation in her daughter's honor. Every year they host a International Overdose Awareness Night vigil, and they've expanded from where they're currently located in Gardner to add more and more of the surrounding communities, and they've extended the invitation to Rutland this year. So any residents who feel like they'd like to attend this vigil, it's going to take place on August 29th at 6:30 at Monument Park in the city of Gardner. If anyone's lost a family member to an overdose and would like to have them remembered at that night, they can contact the AED Foundation directly, and they'll put a picture up in a memorial slideshow that plays that evening as well. But since it's new to the town this year, it's new that they're expanding out this way, I just wanted to make sure that that was out there for anyone there. And there'll be additional resources that are there if anyone's looking for just support for situations that their families are in, or people they know, or remembering loved ones who have lost their lives due to addiction-related incidents. It's just a night for community get-together for the region. And that is all I have for my update.
Thank you. Do you have any questions for Mike?
No.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh,
I just
Sheila Joe has one in the back.
Just one quick update.
Oh.
We completed our repairs to the driveway between the two schools.
I was forgetting.
And I just want to point out, we got a lot of complaints there last winter. We spent a lot of resources patching and salting it, so it was a good use of our resources to patch it, but it's not a road. So the funds used to pay for that came out of highway. We can't use Chapter 90 money to make repairs to that because, again, it's just a driveway. So I sent an email out to the town administrator, I'm sure he forwarded it on. At some point, we'll have to make some long-term decisions on both the parking lots and what we want to do with that road. A lot of people in town seem to use it to bypass traffic in town, so it's used quite a lot, whether it's school-related or not. All right?
The portion just about where the pavement changes, you can see it. Not for the new pavement, but if you can go where it's still all there, is included in the school department lease
Yeah.
as the driveway for the two schools. But
Yeah.
it's bookended by town-owned roads. So that's it. It would actually, any repair work done would fall under the whole $30,000 threshold in the school lease agreement type thing.
So I think you might be aware that, I know RDIC has mentioned this before, just because it does affect their property, that we got a listing on a bond bill back in 2014. There's $900,000 listed, and as we say all the time, it's not money sitting in a closet somewhere. We would need to show a pretty significant good faith effort towards design, construction, in order to get access to that money, and even then, it's not a done deal, and I don't think $900,000 would cover it for what you're talking about. We've had long discussions in the past about whether or not to make that an accepted road. I guess the only thing, devil's advocate, we have so many issues with people speeding that with it not being a road, we have more opportunity to do even temporary seasonal speed bumps. Just a thought.
Again, I just had to bring it to everyone's attention. We used a significant amount of resources.
Thanks.
And it may not be the best use of those resources, but it has to be done. I did notify the police once we completed the repairs and asked them to keep an eye on that. And I guess the chief explained that it's typical for them to monitor that quite a bit at the start of the school year.
Yep.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
If I may, through the chair, ask Joe a question.
Name and address again.
Sean Moore, 3 Edson Avenue.
Thank you.
Is there a way that we can ask the school to pay for that, to compensate the town for doing them a favor by patching their road?
We own the property. Unfortunately, yeah, the lease agreement's pretty straightforward. I mean, we maintain those roads, we plow,
Okay.
we mow the lawns on the fields, so unfortunately, no. I think,
Maybe increase their rent. I don't know.
I like the speed bump idea. I just think we should make some long-term decisions. That's all.
Maybe as part of a gift payment for the marijuana business, we could request some money for that. Wink, wink, nod, nod.
Through the chair,
yes.
to Joe. I don't know if you know it or not, but just after that patch that you put in, on the left-hand side, just before Central Tree, there is a tree that the Rutland Concom put there as a elm tree way back when the school first opened, and it is now being overgrown by everything, and I was kind of upset when I went down by there and saw that. So I don't know if you know where it is or not, or if anybody at your place.
Dick, could you mark it with some colored?
I'll put some flagging on the
Okay.
tree itself.
Okay.
And if you could clean it up, it would be very nice.
It's alive?
It's alive, oh yes.
Okay. Well, I thought that was headed somewhere worse.
No, it just needs to be cleaned up around it.
All right.
Don't touch any trees.
Okay.
We had quite a group there, and the whole landmark was there when we did it. so.
Which, is it on the Naquag side or the Central Tree side?
Central Tree,
I mean,
just as you're coming into the opening of the Central Tree, it's on the left-hand side.
if you mark it, I'm sure there's a student group that would clean it for you.
Well, as long as they clean it and mow it and,
Is there a plaque on it or around for it?
no.
Okay.
Way back, there might have been.
No, I was just curious, just thinking
Like a-
student group or something
Yeah.
that might be interested, or a scout group or
Yep.
something that might be interested in.
They're old enough. Junior National Honor Society.
Yeah.
There's kids that could do that. They're always looking for
Well,
manageable
I'll,
projects.
I'll mark it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
That went far better than I thought it was going. I'm going to backtrack. Could we do the minutes, please, from March, July 15, and July 29?
Can we take them separate so I can recuse from
We
March?
absolutely will take them separate. Can I have a motion for March 25th?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the Monday, March 25th meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
They're in your minutes folder. Thank you for the second. That was as presented.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, 4, and 1
Recusal.
abstain, recuse. All right, July 15th.
I'll make a motion to approve the meetings, the meeting minutes for the Monday, July 15th, 2019 meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, with the notes, Mike, that we had 2 that
Yep.
were remote.
Yep.
And July 29th.
Make a motion to approve the Monday, July 29th, Board of Selectmen meeting minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
That's
Any
I'll do a
comments?
second. Nope.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstain.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to move on. Under old business number 9, board liaison list, you have that as 019. 2 documents, the FY19, and then our blank is, it says 2019, but it's obviously FY20. And there is no scientific way of doing this. If people have a feeling, one way or the other, about a first choice, please list it, and we'll go down the line. Or we can have a preliminary conversation about whether anybody wants to do this at all. And I want to preface that by saying, just because there are board and committee liaisons does obviously not mean that any board member cannot go to a meeting, talk to the other committees and commissions and boards. You're welcome to do that. This was meant to be a facilitative exercise.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
We've heard a lot of feedback from different boards over the past several months about communication perhaps not being where they'd like it to be from the select board. So I'm not sure this process is helping. I think we need to foster better communication in open session by having maybe boards provide us with updates or regular communication versus the liaison if it's not something that's currently working, and it sounds like it's not. And it's another meeting commitment for everybody involved too, so it's tough for people to
Yeah.
attend every meeting.
I'm going to keep looking at Skip every time Skip shows up to a meeting, right? Because we did this for a very long time in the absence of a town administrator. Town administrator came on, we sort of let it go. There was a bit of a back step, I think, when it was clear that, the TA was having a lot of time taken up with some of the appointed meetings.
Yeah.
And so there was an element of, well, okay, let's try this again. But we could do both. We could still do liaisons and also do meetings where we reach out. I know Conservation Commission in particular, right, wanted to have essentially a joint meeting to try to work out maybe goals and objectives. I could go either way.
I agree, that shit's.
I personally had liked the idea of the liaisons, but I felt that I wish that I had a little bit more guidance as to how I best could be used. I didn't go to every one of my board and commissions meetings. They knew that I was accessible if they needed me, if they had questions or something. But a lot of it, I wasn't making any decisions. It was, I will take information, pass it on to Mike, or talk to Mike, or I can, make a push to make sure that it gets put on an agenda for us. But I'm not, other than that, it would be like, oh, hey, heads up, did you see that budgets are due by whenever? Or, just kind of that kind of stuff, not anything that, so I'm kind of, I don't think that it was necessarily working the way it was, but I like the idea of having some sort of a little bit more connectedness. How that looks, I don't know.
It's tough too because we're in elected positions, right? And you have groups that are representing different things. My fear too is that you have groups that might be moving forward with certain structure, a certain movement, and you have an elected official here that might have an agenda that might be antithetical to what some of these boards and commissions maybe are discussing. I just, the process, it's been made very clear, I think, to me, in the short time being here, that this process has been kind of a breakdown in communication with the boards and with the select board. We have a staff to manage communications going back and forth. I'm not sure what the value is to maintain the current structure if we're not going to make a commitment to attend every meeting or a certain number of meetings per quarter. So I think there's also the intimidation factor of some of these boards you go to, and they might be afraid to, certain members that are volunteering might be afraid to bring certain things up or address certain issues if you have members of the select board there. So that's the feedback I've received, and I'm just a little concerned about the process and how it's been managed.
Okay. I mean, some of the things you mentioned are far more serious than naming liaisons. And I do think, Leah, you have a point too, which is it's not like we set a structure, and you said it as well. You know,
Right.
Is it, okay, you're the liaison, you must attend every meeting?
I think we said
There's-
1 a quarter, but
Well,
It's
there's
been
no
tough.
way I was never going to be able to attend school committee meetings, everyone. There was
Right.
absolutely no way. So I can see, like, how do you feel?
Well, the reason I have Mondays off is for these meetings.
Yeah.
The rest of the week, it's hit or miss whether I get out of work on time.
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, I can't make a commitment.
And then it came down to were the liaisons meant to be attending the meetings? Were they attending the meetings just to observe? In which case, were they observing and then coming back and reporting to the board? Or were they just there to be a contact point? And even then, it was not a requirement that they had to be the contact point. So yeah, there was a lot of flexibility and gray area there.
Yeah.
I
I mean, we can rely more on the TA too, to.
I mean, I think, Mike, do you normally I think you normally try to check in with the chairs of all the boards and commissions
Yeah.
within the week that they have their meeting, right?
I'll reach
Just
out as best I can. Yeah.
to touch base with if they have any questions or concerns or whatever. I mean, maybe we don't make any appointments. If we want to go to meetings, we go to meetings, as we have every right to go as the public.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of what I do when it comes to a lot of the boards and commissions is we have department heads who meet with these boards and commissions on a very regular basis. So I check in with the department head and does this board or commission have stuff to go with? The building commissioner for the ZBA, the town planner for the planning board, things. And I mean, because Dave will go to the RDIC meetings, he'll go to the planning board meetings.
Right.
We have Diane who sits in on all of the Board of Assessors meetings.
Yeah.
So I normally just reach out to the department heads who act as my liaisons to these boards and commissions.
Okay. And the other thing is, we've been talking about apples and oranges all night. These are a list of very apples and oranges, committees, commissions, boards, right?
Absolutely.
Historical commission, which is just now getting off the ground after
2 people.
a year of being almost defunct, versus the Wachusett Regional School Committee, $100 million budget. So I mean, they're
Maybe we take a year off and then solicit feedback from the boards and commissions.
Did you miss us?
No, but at some point, like,
I'm sure you're gonna be
no,
an
but
answer to
at
that.
some point, like, how can we improve communication, or how can communication with the Board of Selectmen be improved, and then have that sort of feedback, because then it takes it off of us from having to try to fit in every meeting. There's some meetings that I can make more easily than others, and it's less of a challenge if it's not like, oh, I haven't been there, I need to get there, versus.
May I make a suggestion
Sean?
from the chair as an elected official? How about do it the other way around? Have a member from each board be a liaison to the select board to come to a select board meeting maybe once a month to kind of give a monthly update. You do department head meetings, you get it that way, but this way you can have someone from each board say, come and be like, this is what we've done this month. Kind of flip it around a little bit.
And we can be prefaced with the minutes.
Sure.
We can review them and then
Yeah.
have the board provide us an update. I think having them come to us would be.
So devil's advocate, we can't require it of the elected boards. It would just be an invitation.
Right.
And for the appointed, I think it would be also invitation/suggestion. But one of the reasons why the liaison thing had initially come up was to try to do more outreach rather than summoning these people to the board.
Well,
But I totally see what you're saying.
Yeah, as a member of being elected to a board and then formally being on a board appointed.
Yeah.
When there wasn't much feedback going back and forth when a liaison came
Yep.
to a meeting. It was just kind of sitting off to the side. That way, you could definitely know what's going on.
Yeah.
You could have it be volunteered from each
Yeah.
board. But I don't think any board would deny sending somebody.
I think, yeah, to that
Sure they
point,
would.
the problem arose in particular 2 weeks ago when we had kind of or the board relayed information or things they wanted to see from Concom that wasn't relayed to Concom, or at least Concom felt that information had not been relayed effectively, and it became kind of somewhat contentious, I would say, for a public meeting.
So I would argue, and I know where you're headed, that's
Do
a
you?
separate, I think, well, I don't know, but that's a bit of a separate discussion, because I agree. There's no way you would want a liaison to walk into another board's meeting and say, by the way, the board wants you to do this, this, and this.
But it surfaced, though, after I think what happened is, you had folks talking about what Concom was doing. The board had discussed it, whether an open meeting or not, and then come with preferences as to who they wanted to appoint. I think, you have a situation where you have these liaisons that may convey information back,
Mm-hmm.
and they're kind of being seen as, well, maybe we shouldn't broach this issue because the liaison's here, and then you're going to have an issue like Concom come up.
Oh, I think you're right, I guess I didn't know. I think where I was headed was, one of the things that came up was, you didn't tell us what you wanted, and I think that would be something new for this board to say to its appointed only commissions, committees, et cetera, to say, we have this list of goals for you, and that would have to be a larger project, and not just for one, but for everybody, and not just through liaisons, but a very open meeting discussion.
I'm fine with taking a year off.
Taking a year off?
I think public
Let's
comment.
Skip?
way in on this.
Yep.
Glenwood Road.
You want us to?
The biggest problem in it, all the years I was up there too, the communications from the board to the other boards is very poor. Like Leah said, she had complaints about Concom. She never called Concom to say, hey, we got complaints about this, this, or this. Did you, Leah?
No.
So you can't blame a board for something they're not doing if you don't reach out to them and say, hey, there's problems here, problems there.
Yeah.
And this has been ongoing for 12 years that I know of, and that I was up there.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of line that's the right spot for that, where you're giving a committee, board, commission, again, appointed, some guidance, because you did appoint them.
If somebody calls you, Sheila, and says, hey, this is wrong, you should, or any member up there should pick up the phone and call Dick Williams, or Joe over there, or me, the chair of the Concom, or whoever, and say, hey,
Yeah.
you got a problem, you guys got to fix it, and not just beat around the bush.
Or we could talk about it in open session.
Oh, but, well, and again, it
That's-
comes back to, are you
comes back to what it should
micromanaging
be.
the committee that you seated yourself versus giving them sort of bigger umbrella general direction to go with? And there's got to be a line there that we can get better at. Yeah.
Communications, terrible in this town. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Aren't they, Richard?
Yes.
Sounds like what we've got here is a failure to communicate.
Oh my God! All right, Can I move on that quote? I'm going.
Move on.
I'm going on. So we are. 019 is no action for the evening. We are taking a break. Yes.
Yes.
Taking a break.
Okay.
Can revisit another day. All right, we are on to goals and objectives, FY 2020. This is the document that was generated from our meeting way back in June. Thank you. This document is being presented for review tonight.
Yep.
And some commentary. If anybody wanted to have a discussion about anything specific that they're looking at right now, I know this might be the first time some of you are looking at it.
Yeah. Did we? I think something that came up. Okay, there it is. I think this is comprehensive and encapsulated the conversation. I think there are certain issues on here, particularly the one under buildings and town property. It has listed as a board goal to obtain right of first refusal on a privately owned home on Glenwood.
Yeah, do you want to take that off?
Can we remove
was just a
that? I
discussion.
mean, have we broached the owner of that house?
No.
And why are we including it in a goal-setting meeting or a
I think it's on
topic.
this document because I brought it up,
We
but
discussed.
it doesn't mean it's an active goal.
If you look in the last column, it says action plan dash next steps. I went through, and if something's been worked on, put that it's been worked on, but if it's a generic term, then
Okay.
that's the action step that the board recommended at the goal meeting of June 6th. So for instance, you'll see the business on Route 68 under action plan, it says talk to RDIC. That's what the board recommended at that meeting.
We did.
Yeah, that's my.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it doesn't make. I don't know why that would. Why would you talk to RDIC about
No.
a separate business district? I
Was
think
it-
that's a town
Yeah.
decision and a town decision only. I don't
No,
think
I
RDIC
just,
should
Was
be
it maybe
involved.
talk to somebody else, not RDIC?
it was
RDIC's, I believe it's in their bylaw.
Yeah.
It's in there.
RDIC's technically in charge of all industrial areas
maybe that's
in
what-
the town. That's why it got brought up at that meeting.
But it's not a. It's not a designated area yet. I mean, we're just talking about.
No, but it's zoned for, and that's, but it's not, you're right, we can handle that as a town side, it's just the suggestion was made at that meeting while talking about this goal. That's why it's there. That can change.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no. I just.
So I think at this point, looking over any of them, if you think something got missed, if you want to add something, if something came to you in a dream, we can absolutely add it. This is an active working document. If anyone who's here tonight has goals and objectives for us, yeah.
One of the things I brought up, excuse me, under departments, was having the departments submit long-range goals yearly to the board, whether it be 1, 5, 10, and sometimes that might not change from year to year, but
Yep.
so going forward year to year, the board can look and see the progress, where the goal was intended to be and where it actually is.
With that too, I did send this document off to the department heads too, so they could tell me what their goals are.
Mm.
So I do have an in progress on that one, so.
So that was done in there.
Yep.
Like, I think this was on here, but I saw it in another community the other day. Now I can't find it. We don't have a process by which a community member can be recognized for services, say an annual
Okay.
award.
Okay.
It was in the news just recently, it was local. We have so many people in town who give so much of their time, and we really don't have a mechanism yet that I can think of to do
We've
that. to
had a
recognize.
couple proclamations. I know Jeff
Yep.
did one.
Yep.
I think that's been pretty effective.
Yep.
What more were you looking at other than that?
I'm thinking along the lines of someone being nominated by a resident.
Like a citizen of the year type thing?
A little bit, yeah. And we could have a longer discussion about what the criteria would be, right? Is it service to the town? Is it just service to the greater community? It could be, yeah. I think there are community, neighboring towns that do it.
Princeton has like a traveling plaque, Citizen of the Year.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I think Mike has made headway, best as he can with different recognitions.
Oh, thank you.
Whether it be a town leaf or something special.
Mhm. Yeah, I think we've gotten a lot better, that's for sure.
So
I want to note that improve relations with boards and commissions is on our goal sheet. So that kind of to
If that
follow up on
helps,
that
yeah.
conversation.
Well, and look, liaisons is on the goal sheet. We can just cross that right off. Our goals are shorter now. All right, please feel free to email Mike with any more additions, subtractions, comments. We're going to keep working on this. I actually pulled out my old goal sheet to see where we are. I have handwritten notes like you do, Dick, by the way.
Goals and objectives, I think Concom's here, and open space and recreation. Maybe the TA ought to take a look at, in there, the various boards, their goals and objectives, and then maybe bring those up too.
Sure.
There are some in there.
Open space and
Oh,
rec is almost due. Was it 14 or 16 that we finally finished it? Who in this room knows that answer?
I think it had to have been 16.
16.
Yeah, I think it
So
was
I guess we have a
16.
little
And so
time.
it's 7 years now.
Yeah, I guess we have a little
But
time.
I know there's one in there for the planning board, and I don't know how they're gonna do it, but I think it'd be a good
It
idea.
needs to be resubmitted in 2022, the next edition.
Thank you, Peter.
Awesome. We'll try to take a look at it and,
See what we've done and what we need to.
yes, please.
We really need to set Peter up more like Wizard of Oz, where his voice can just come from behind us.
I'm an intercom.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody else have anything right now on goals and objectives document? If not, we're going to move on. All right. Appointment of election officials.
I think, can we just, real quick?
Yep.
Do we have, okay, so the select board members' town email addresses, are we gonna try to move towards kind of an overall all-encompassing email system that would encompass all of the elected officials?
Yeah, as funds become available.
Okay, great.
What about our Chromebooks?
Those are on the way. Yeah, Paul is working to set them up, and he's setting them up with the new email addresses too, so it'll all roll in together.
So,
Good.
timeline?
End of the month, probably next meeting.
All right. You have a document 052 from Anita with a list of election officers to be appointed. If somebody could read this list. Actually, you can just read the motion at the bottom unless anybody in the audience would like us to read the whole list.
I move that the slate is presented be appointed election officers for the town of Rutland pursuant to MGL, Chapter 54, Section 12.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody would like the list? Here it is. Thank you very much. Mike, accident updates.
We had 2 recent accidents that garnered media attention in town. One at the intersection of Route 68 and Wachusett Street 2 weeks ago, in which a young child was injured and listed as critical. She is doing okay. In response to that accident, we formed a interdepartmental review commission made up of the 2 chiefs and Joe Buckley, who are investigating the intersection and seeing if there's anything else that can be done to help make it a safer route there. And they are working diligently on that, be it new signage, reaching out to DOT to see what could be done on 68, and things of that nature. There was an accident that garnered significant media attention this past weekend involving one of our police officers. If anyone's seen the press releases that have been released from both our police department and the district attorney's office, a Worcester resident got called in for driving erratically in the town of Paxton, and which turned into a car chase with the Paxton Police Department. The driver of the car was driving toward the town of Rutland, so the Paxton Police Department called the Rutland Police Department to help intercept the person. And the driver switched lanes and sped head-on into the police cruiser that had Officer Finuccio and K-9 Cooney in the car. The Paxton officer, trying to avoid the crash, rolled his cruiser down the hill. The driver of the car was pronounced deceased at the scene. Officer Finuccio had some minor injuries and is fine. K-9 Cooney is fine. We had him checked out at the vet. At Tufts Emergency Room, and then again today for a double check, and he is fine, and the Paxton police officer is also fine. By some miracle that happened, because if you saw the pictures, it was rough. But I do want to give a shout out to the police department in general for how they've handled these accidents on the scene as they've started. The same with our EMS departments and the fire department for responding, because both times things have gone very smooth and couldn't have been better, and we're lucky that everyone who was injured was able to recover fully.
And Mike, nice job responding yourself and communicating with the board on what was going on very important issues. So,
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Joe, I have to ask. A former board, so a little bit different makeup, voted a very long time ago to put rumble strips on Wachusett Street. And we got a lot of reasons why it didn't get done. I don't know that it's a solution, but it's an easy attempt at something, because the fact of the matter is, within the bounds of Rutland, there are 3 crossings, and Wachusett Street is the only one that has those significant, and it seems like constant, safety issues. And I know you're looking at lots of things. I'm happy to hear that. It's just that we've looked at lots of things before. This board can have another conversation about rumble strips, I suppose, if they want. But I'm frustrated. I am.
A couple quick things, and I just want to clarify something that the town administrator had said. We actually formed that committee some time ago, and it also addresses parking.
Okay.
We review things like parking for events, and try and figure out where we can do better. And accidents is something that's been added recently. Regarding that, I think the first step is to make sure that everything is built according to Mass Highway spec, and I'd start there. There are some specifications for when and if you add rumble strips. So our first step is to find out, is it even necessary?
Is there any way to?
I was just gonna add, my personal feeling is something major has to be done at the intersection.
Yeah, I agree.
Whether it be traffic lights, stopping each direction,
LED stop sign, maybe?
I think more than that, more than that.
The first step, we're going to try and contact Mass Department of Transportation or Mass DOT and see if they can do a safety audit. Looking at anything in addition to that, you're looking at hiring an engineering consultant to go in and make recommendations for you. We don't have anyone on staff who could, myself included, who could make suggestions on that level.
Because there had been, from my understanding, quite a number of accidents at that intersection. Is there a common, to your knowledge, is there a common theme as to what's causing them in terms of, are people just running the light and getting hit, or what is the, is there a common theme, or is it just different on a case-by-case basis?
In all frankness, I have some thoughts. I'd like to think it's case-by-case basis, but at least the current accident is still being reviewed
Right.
by a regional group that, and I don't want to speak out of turn until that report's available.
Okay.
Yeah, we are part of a regional organization that has a accident reconstruction team through local police departments. So the accident reconstructor out of Mendon is currently in town conducting a formal investigation and reconstruction of the whole accident on that one.
In all fairness, Mitch, I'd rather have that in hand before we have this conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
If I may ask through the chair a question to Joe, what does it take to put a Sean Moore 3 at Synaptis once again?
In case I forgot where you were.
To put up a stoplight for two intersections in town that are extremely dangerous. The accidents always happen. Palmagussit and 122 down by Four Corners. Always accidents happen down there. People.
Oh, you mean
Pleasantdale.
Pleasantdale, yeah, Pleasantdale. And right there on Wachusett and 68. What does it take for a town? Now, those are both state highways, I understand that.
Well,
to put
the
in a
difference is
stoplight.
122 is actually a state highway.
Yes.
Route 68 is in town control, but it's a numbered mass route.
Okay.
So in other words, 122 is a completely late, they plow it, they repair it, that's all Mass DOT.
Okay.
68, we plow it, we fix it. They're both numbered routes, but that's the difference between the two. So what is your question?
Well, what does it take to put up a stoplight? I mean, does a town do that?
They
Or
can,
does...
there's a warrant procedure, it can be done.
Okay.
Yep.
Can a citizen submit a request for that, or?
Well, there's a blinking light at Wachusett Street. It blinks red for Wachusett, it blinks yellow for 68. There
Yeah,
are
same with
stop
Palmagussit,
signs.
same,
Right.
Pleasantdale.
Pleasantdale. There are stop signs on Wachusett Street as well. We know we have the hill coming down from the Princeton side. I don't know why it doesn't happen as much at Glenwood. I think the traffic numbers are probably similar. I actually just said 62. It's technically not in Rutland, but it's close by. 62 has a good-sized light there that flashes and has some strobing to it. If we look at the intersection, if you're on Quinnapoxet, heading up into Holden, there is a very similar intersection there where one-way must stop. And there's a small sign that says cross traffic does not stop. They don't see the accidents that we see at Wachusett 68. And so I guess I get what you're saying, Joe. I mean, I think one of the things that makes you so good at your job is how methodical you are. It's just that this isn't new for us. And I feel like anything we can throw at this can't make it worse. Maybe that's where I'm coming from.
I would just proceed cautiously.
I know.
What you don't want to do is, and that's me,
I
what
know.
you don't want to do is jump to conclusions and possibly put signage that leads to an accident.
Well,
or leads to further confusion, or, and I'd rather leave that one to an expert. So we'll go down the route of talking to the state first, and if we need to get a consultant on board, we will.
Okay. Dick?
I was just gonna say, one of the things was, no passing. Too many people are passing, and, you know, you start putting on your blinker to turn right or left, and somebody always zings by you.
I mean, it's clearly not just us. Did anybody see the
Oh, yeah.
Falmouth accident? Or Mashpee just this past week? It was awful.
What I can say is, all existing signage, the stop signs, they were in place, they weren't damaged.
Yep.
The lights were working as intended.
Yep.
The line of sight is good there.
Yep.
The road's pretty well laid out, and it was recently cut back.
Yep.
DPW crews had cut back the vegetation there, so you had good line of sight.
Mhm.
I think if you step back and look at the report once it's available, you might want to make some different decisions. All right?
Fair enough.
All right.
Thank you. All right, where are we? Open meeting law, 054. So you have several documents there. The first is the open meeting law official complaint form from the Office of the Attorney General. Page 2 is the one that's filled out and signed. And then 05402 is some backup information. 05403 is the 3-page response from legal.
If I
And Mike, yeah, go right ahead.
So I spoke at length with Attorney Goldberg from KP Law about how this process is to proceed. How this works is the complaint identifies 3 members of the select board. Those members do not recuse themselves from discussion, as this next step is we've received a complaint. This is the board's response to what is in the complaint. So the 3 members who are listed have a right to defend themselves at said point. The 2 that are not listed have a right to either choose to participate in the discussion of this or to recuse themselves. That's their prerogative to do so. But those that are listed must be in the response for the complaint. At this point, how it goes is the complainant has submitted what they believe to be a violation of the Massachusetts open meeting law. The board members of at least those listed need to respond saying X, Y, and Z, and vote to send a formal response to the Attorney General's office and the complainant. If the complainant believes that the response is insufficient or flawed, then they take it to the next level at the Attorney General review, where the Attorney General then fully reviews both the complaint and the response and makes a determination at that point. So up until this point, the only people who have reviewed the response are myself in my office when it was received, town council, as is required by the open meeting law for us to send to them, and the members of the board who have received it today, and when it was sent out. So at this point, this isn't a portion of the meeting for public comment, as it is something that could have been eligible for executive session. It's being done in open session due to falling just underneath what the threshold would be for executive session, but there's just for members of the board to respond, and then comments, evidence, things of that nature would come up in the next step if the complainant chooses to take it to that next level at the Attorney General's office.
Okay.
You'll notice in the letter that's draft, it is not on letterhead because it is still draft, but you'll notice the printer in the annex forgot to put the watermark on the first page. That's just because the printer can act up at times, but this is a draft. That is the reason why there's also blank fill-in spots in the letter, is if the board chooses to proceed with this draft letter that town council has drafted just off preliminary conversations on the complaint, and after reviewing the complaint, those get filled in and then sent by our town council to the Attorney General's office. But again, because the complaint doesn't accuse the full board of violating the open meeting law, that's why town council just wants to make sure it's clear that those that are listed must reply those that are not listed have an option to participate in the discussion or not. If there are any further questions,
So can we discuss this in open session,
yes.
the draft?
Yeah.
Yep.
So the 3 people listed are myself, Leah, and Jeff. Wayne and Mitch, based on what Mike just said, you may choose to participate and vote or recuse. If you recuse, I guess we would have you leave the table temporarily. I don't know if that's actually required in this case.
It is
You could
not,
just
no.
recuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna recuse myself from this.
I, because of the way the letter is structured, would like to participate.
Okay, so we have the complaint form as filed. I think probably, well, we could have a preliminary discussion and then a motion, one way or the other, or we can have the motion, the second, and then the discussion on the motion, which is probably the way to go.
Yes. If I may, just one last clarification too, and I do want to throw out that, just for my own purposes, that I'm just here as a technical advisor based on what town council told me.
Okay.
I have no stake in this. That there was an area of the complaint that town council said falls outside of the purview of the open meeting law, and would fall under a different complaint process that the complainant can come see me after, and we can talk about what that process would be.
Okay.
About a member of the select board referring to the complainant in a certain manner.
Okay.
Directly, since that is not about discussions that took place with the members on what the open meeting law says. It's a different complaint procedure for this, and that's listed in town council's response there.
Okay.
I don't know if you wanted to read the whole. It'd probably be best to read the initial dialogue box of the allegation at the front,
Okay.
and begin from there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the dialogue box is not addressed at all by the letter provided by town council. So my major concern is if we're sending this, well, whoever, the listed members are sending this to the Attorney General's office, we should at least make sure that the letter is factually accurate, right? And my issue with it is, so in the second paragraph, Attorney Goldberg writes that the facts I understand are as follows. Following this non-appointment to the Conservation Commission, Mr. Moore made a public records request for any records created by the members of the Board of Selectmen as to reappointments to the position. Pictures of text messages from Selectman Jeffrey Stillings and Selectman Sheila Dibb indicated that Selectman Stillings was not going to be able to attend the meeting at which Conservation Commission appointments were to be made, and further that he was going to ask Selectman Leah Whitman whether he could Skype into the meeting and participate remotely. I understand further that Selectman Whitman made a statement at the board's meeting on that Selectman Stillings had, in fact, contacted her about participating remotely. All 3 members of the board named herein flatly deny that any interaction occurred about who would be appointed to the position, and said such interaction revolved around whether Mrs. Stillings would be able to participate in the meeting. And then she goes on to conclude, a serial communication amongst a quorum concerning whether a member may participate does not constitute a matter for consideration. The issue is that in that text chain, the selectman indicated that he had a preference that Sean not be reappointed. And in the following meeting, Leah had indicated that Jeff had called him and they had talked about Concom appointments at a high level. So it wasn't just whether or not the select person could attend via Skype. And I'm not sure what the attorney was referring to, if she had seen that in the text message exchange. That's just not factual based on the information that was provided to our municipal attorney. So that's my problem with it, is it skirts over the entire crux of the issue, which isn't whether or not somebody could participate. It was whether or not somebody had a preference not to appoint a member of the public that wanted to volunteer, and whether that information was conveyed, which the text message and then Leah confirmed at the meeting, that conversation had been had.
So I think, if I may, I said at the meeting that I had talked in generalities about appointments in general. I had the conversation with Jeff about, he had said that he was going to FaceTime into the meeting with Mike. I don't have FaceTime, so that he was FaceTiming into the meeting with Mike. And I had asked Jeff if he had passed along Lynn Turcotte's and Kevin Jarvie's interest to the town administrator, because Jeff was the one that had pointed out in the previous meeting that he was going to follow up with the Historical Commission as liaison for Lynn's appointment. So that was the extent of, I had no idea how anybody was voting or preferences. My whole point was, are people that are interested, has their information been passed on to Mike? I was going to call Mike. I was on the phone with Jeff.
So what kind of response is needed? I mean, a written brief back to KP Law? I mean, what are you looking for?
Well, no. So the KP Law provided a response based on quorum voting that it believes it did not violate open meeting law, that it denies it. At that point, the complainant would go to the next level relative to the AG's office. Now, that vote needs to be a regular vote, right? If it fails, and that's a conversation you and I had, it would essentially be the board, I believe, agreeing that there had been a violation of open meeting law. That response would then get sent to the AG's office, and the AG's office would then provide a suitable
sanction.
Yeah. Well, how are we going to vote if the allegation is against us?
You actually are voting on whether or not you believe you violated the open meeting law. You
So I think
yeah,
and I asked how this vote's going to go. I mean,
I asked that question.
my problem is the way this is written, it skirts over the crux of the issue. And the issue wasn't whether or not somebody could Skype. It's whether or not there was a preference and a bias against someone in the public that wanted to serve on Concom, which was demonstrated via the text message exchange. I'm not sure where Attorney Goldberg missed that information.
Yeah, so I'll try to hit both of those, and if I forget any part, call me out on it. I'll be sure to get to it. The process for this is, for lack of a better term, the board's chance to defend themselves against the complaint that was given.
So as part of that defense, we omit factual information? Is that?
No.
Okay.
No, that's not what I was saying. That I was answering Jeff's question on that one. So the process here would be to send a formal response from the board that was passed by a majority of its members saying, we believe we didn't violate open meeting law because of X, or correct, we believe that this was a poor judgment on the board, a violation of the open meeting law, and we admit to the accusation. I would then have to send a letter of that vote to the Attorney General's office to submit some type of sanction watchdog or something like that for the board. If the board votes, no, we didn't because of X, I send that letter that's signed by the board chair or town council, the board has the option, to the Attorney General's office, the Attorney General, and to the person who submitted the complaint. At that point, the person who submitted the complaint can request a next level review by the Attorney General's office. To bring it to a different analogy, to try to make it clear, it's like when you're being sued, you receive the complaint, you have a chance to give your defense, and it can either be settled or it can go to trial. This is the you're submitting your end of the story type thing.
Or a mediation.
Yeah. The factual side of things, I did ask Attorney Goldberg, because I did expect that question to be asked. The screenshot of the text message between two members where it mentioned the third member of the board wasn't where the other part, the appointment candidate's name was mentioned. It was mentioned as, I'll see if Leah could FaceTime me into the meeting. Where that comes through is a board member can ask one other board member their opinion on a matter before the board.
Sure.
What's unallowed is if one member of the board, if Mo calls Larry and says, I'm going to vote this way on an item, how are you voting? And then calls Curly and says, me and Larry are voting this way, how are you going to vote? That's a violation there, because now you're involving 3 people on a specific agenda item. Where the exception to that is schedule and access. There could be a conference call with all 5 members of the board that says, we're looking to hold a meeting, does this date work for you? Or I can't make it to a meeting, can someone take notes, call me in, get a hold? That is specifically exempted under the open meeting law, and I think that's where town council went with that one.
Great.
I did ask that same question for similar reason.
So to Mitch's point, was our attorney sent the FOIA requested text
Yes,
messages?
yes, because that was attached to the complaint.
Okay.
As well as there were other items that were submitted with the complaint that included a YouTube video for the last select board meeting, and then pending approval at tonight's meeting, the minutes of the July 15th select board meeting.
Okay. So what are you recommending be read into the record?
Just the description of alleged violation.
Okay, so open meeting law, did somebody else want to read this? Good to
No,
see.
read it.
Open meeting law complaint form, can I leave out the complainant? Does that matter? Can I just read the body?
This is a public document at this point, but it's up to you.
I received from a record request 3 select board members chatting over the internet. Jeff Stillings, Sheila Dibbs, and Leah Whiteman about decisions being made on not reappointing members of the Conservation Commission. The 3 of them together creates a quorum which violates open meeting law. I also have a letter from Jeff Stillings to the town administrator, openly in public record, calling me a maroon. By definition, this is a racial slur, but I think he meant, in other words, a moron, which I consider defamation of my character. I also have a copy of a conversation with one of the select members, Sheila Dibbs, where she basically accuses planning board members being in favor of special interests and not the town. If you would like to contact me, my number is. What action do you want the public body to take in response to your complaint, whatever the appropriate action is for this violation to its full extent? Date of alleged violation, well, I think it's multiples, but it's dated 7/7 with a submission date of 7/29.
Now that that's read into the record, I can say that the portion that falls outside of the open meeting law, there are 2. The comment of a moron maroon, that would fall under the ethics violation complaint process, as does the text messages that are alleged in the last couple lines about planning board members, so long as it was not to 2 or more other select board members, that would fall under the ethics complaint violation process. That was the guidance we received this afternoon from town council when they sent us this letter. The letter is addressed to Carrie Brennan, who is the Director of Open Government and Open Meeting Law at the Attorney General's office.
Okay. Okay, so the only actions before the board tonight are to take a vote, one way or the other, on the motion as presented by council.
Correct. And if you go to document number 054-3, there is a draft motion that Attorney Goldberg provided.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Is anyone going to make that motion?
0543 is the email from,
From Lauren, yeah. It's right before her signature. It starts on based upon the legal standards. On the
I'm
second
not
page.
seeing it.
It's the second page.
Oh, I see.
It's in block text right before her
Based
email.
upon the legal standards and facts discussed today, it is hereby moved that the board denies that it violated the open meeting law in serial conversation amongst a quorum whether a board member could participate remotely, a non-substantive and procedural matter akin to scheduling, needs not to take any remedial action with respect thereto, values and will continue to meet its obligations under the open meeting law, and requests that town council file a response to the complaint consistent with this vote.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
We'll do roll call for this, please.
No discussion first.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, first we'll discuss. Is there any more discussion?
I want to reiterate that this is disappointing because this process also costs the town and the taxpayers money to move forward. And I know we've had discussions before, and I know there have been several instances where I've been uncomfortable with emails that have been sent to the board from the board chair discussing about how to have meetings outside of open meeting law, and that the Wachusett Regional School District does it all the time, which I checked with the superintendent's office, and that is not true. So things like that, they come back and it gets to the public, and the public gets uncomfortable with the way that we conduct business. And if the public loses faith in this board, that causes a huge problem in the community. And it's just, this coming up is just a little bit disappointing because we're also talking about people that want to volunteer for town positions, and we have to be careful not to relay personal feelings or allow political differences or whatever it may be to cloud judgment in terms of how to move the town forward in the best manner.
Thank you. In response, in regards to the emails from me as the chair regarding a meeting outside of open meeting law, in point of fact, it was a suggestion that the board meet with cameras casually suggested to be not present as part of a goal-setting meeting. There is a member of the audience here tonight who remembers that we did that as well when our former town administrator was here. It was at her suggestion, and she did check with legal counsel to confirm that it was something that was possible for us. The school committee used to go down to Cape Cod for a budget
And were
retreat.
those meetings
Again,
open?
you and I, and this is secondary to the discussion in the motion, but you and I had this discussion. I was not suggesting a non-open meeting. I was suggesting a non-televised meeting. Beside the
No,
point.
you had indicated that those meetings were not open, and that's the model you wanted to follow, and that you received clarification.
I think you
From a
misunderstood.
no, I can. Listen, I'll post the email.
Okay.
Okay.
I will state for the record that I have not had interaction with more than one member regarding anything to do with an appointment relative to this complaint. And in point of fact, I did release the texts as was requested of me. And they are available to the public if anybody would like them. We have a motion and a second on the table. Is there any further discussion? Roll call vote. All in favor?
Stillings aye.
Whitman, aye.
Dib aye. All opposed?
I abstain.
No opposed, one abstain, one recused. All right. So at this point, that response will go. And the complainant now has the ability to go on to the next level with this, okay?
Sure.
Joe, public shade tree. Sorry, I didn't mean to wake you up. You were resting.
Just like I can preface it, and then actually, do you want to start with what the?
It's really easy.
Yeah.
The task of the previous DPW superintendent was a lead tree warden. And worked through some of those tasks. What's come up lately, though, is we've had a couple residents ask to have shade trees that the town owns removed. And, of course, you should have a hearing for that, but more importantly, the trees that have been asked to be removed are quite large, bigger than DPW could take on. And we'd have to come up with funds to pay to have those trees taken down. Now, they may not be damaged in any way, they may not be threatening a road, which by all means, if it was an emergency, we'd take it on and find funds. These are trees where folks, they're in someone's front lawn, and they're within the public right-of-way, and they're so large that DPW can't take them down, yet the person who lives there is requesting a hearing to have it removed.
Why,
So, what?
why does this person want the tree removed?
It's actually a couple of different ones in different parts of town.
Is there a reason behind the trees being removed?
One person told me they don't like breaking leaves anymore. And the
That seems
other,
like a good place to spend taxpayer money.
and the other one was, they had a real hard time during the ice storm. And the tree had gotten much bigger over time, and they felt uncomfortable having it in their front lawn.
Just as a follow-up with this, Mass General Law, Chapter 87, governs shade trees. The procedure for removal of a shade tree is it's not that the town owns it, it's that the tree is located within X number of feet of the right-of-way. And that makes it so that it's the town's responsibility for upkeep and removal. So even if the town didn't plant the tree, if the resident planted the tree within X number of feet of the road, it's the town's responsibility. The reason being is if there's any utility lines, if the roots are growing into the road work, the town has a right to go trim, cut, repair as needed, even though the tree is technically owned by that resident. How the process goes for if a tree needs to be trimmed in a substantial manner, we can go in and do light trimming without a hearing, but if it's a substantial change to the tree or a removal of the tree, there's a public hearing that's required. If the tree is located on a road that's designated by the planning board as a scenic road, that hearing needs to be held before the planning board. If it is not designated on a planning board voted and accepted scenic road designation, then it comes before the tree warden and the administrator. 2 meetings ago, the Board of Selectmen voted to name Joe as the town's tree warden. The Select Board can override that hearing or make it unnecessary by vote of the Select Board to remove the tree. So no hearing needs to be held if the Select Board votes, yes, cut the tree, as the town's executives at that point.
Do we know roughly what it would cost the town to remove the tree? Because you said we had to contract this out, right, because they're too big?
They're simply too big for anything we have in-house.
Do you have like a
yet.
ballpark as to what this would cost?
I would, only because I had some trees done in my own house recently. It's really my only gauge, so, I don't know, 2,000 to 3,000, maybe as much as 10, it depends on if you need a crane.
Because somebody doesn't want to rake leaves, is that?
It doesn't matter, they've requested
They've requested.
to have the tree removed,
And we have
and
process, yeah.
if, we still have to at least walk through the hearing process
Mhm.
and hear these folks' concerns regardless.
In your opinion, is either tree or any of the trees a safety issue?
So far, no.
Is this, sorry.
The other issue is because this is legally defined as a public shade tree, because it's in the public right of way and provides shade to the street. If the resident was to go out and substantially trim or remove the tree on their own, it's actually punishable by jail time.
Because it's irreplaceable.
Correct. Yeah. It's a week to 30 days.
Did I hear you right? We could vote to cut down the tree,
Mhm.
and that doesn't?
Yeah, that
Cause a
overrides the
hearing?
public hearing. Yeah.
That seems
But it has to be, the first step has to be the
Yeah.
public hearing and a ruling by the tree warden. And the only reason the town administrator is listed is so it's not the tree warden alone.
Yep.
But the final to say is the tree warden's call, which
If
can,
someone likes it or not.
yeah.
I mean, have I looked at some trees that were clearly dangerous, that were clearly town trees that we would go and trim up or remove without a hearing? Absolutely. This is fundamentally different. And we have to at least, whether we agree with the position of the folks or the abutters or not, we have to give them a voice.
Yeah.
So that hearing has to go through regardless. I think after the outcome of the hearing, we're gonna have to look at some funding, because we currently don't have it.
Yeah, basically, the select board is the check and balance to the tree warden's ruling on whether the tree can be cut or not.
Who's the tree warden?
Joe?
Sure. Okay, so are you saying to us officially that you do not want to cut these trees?
I'm not saying one way or another.
Oh.
I'm simply saying that we have to have a hearing.
Yeah.
Someone has requested to have a shade tree removed.
Well, no, we don't have to have a hearing. We could vote tonight to have you cut down these trees.
The hearing does have to happen first.
That's not what I heard.
That's not what I heard either.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
We have to have a
so,
hearing no
okay.
matter what? No,
My-
you said a vote to cut down the trees superseded the hearing.
Yes, G is correct on that one, yes.
So what was your, now you've lost me.
So we have to have a hearing first,
No.
and
If
then,
We
we're
were
going-
suggesting that the hearing happens first. Per chapter 87, technically the select board can just vote
Just
saying
cut
cut the trees down, and the trees would have to be cut down.
Is there any board member that would like to proactively cut the healthy trees down?
At the expense of the town,
At
right?
the expense of the town, they're town trees. Okay, then we're having a hearing. That was easy. But we could have avoided the hearing, just saying.
And just as a general chapter 87 thing to throw out there, the town actually has a right to go in and just put tag a sign on the tree saying tree potentially being removed. If in our planning or the DPW sees that coming down the line, this tree's going to cause some issues, it's looking like it's starting to be a diseased tree, but it's in the public right of way and stuff like that. The procedure with that would be it'd have to be in a newspaper advertisement, and the tree itself would have to be tagged with the date and time of a public hearing. It's a whole big law that's multiple pages on just trees that are located within the right of way.
could
See,
we,
that's a hearing to cut it down.
yeah, could we, because the tree is on personal property, it's
No.
not.
In the case of the ones that I presented to the board, both of them are within the limits of the deeded right-of-way, best I can figure. I mean, we didn't survey it, but we looked at the drawings and figured out roughly,
Right.
they're in the right-of-way, the
So if-
location for the street.
If they weren't town trees, the residents could absolutely, on their own dime, have them cut down, and we would never.
Unless they're in the right of way.
But I mean,
No,
there-
right, but if they
is
were
there a
on private
distinction though?
property.
They're not, are they town trees, or are they just in the right of way that occurs on the property? I mean, is it, so the town is responsible for managing those trees, but could we grant them access to remove them on their own? I know that if they cut them on their own, like they go rogue and cut them in the middle of the night, we can put them in jail for cutting the tree down, based on what I heard. But if we gave them permission to say, look, it's gonna cost $10,000, if you want it removed, we can work with you to do that. Is that a possibility?
I would imagine that's, yes, of course that's a possibility.
Yes, that
But I genuinely believe the folks in question would be trying to pass that expense on.
Well, of course they would.
Yeah.
But
But we don't balance them that much, they'll pay it every time.
I think the concern is, what are you doing to the property values of that entire neighborhood when you remove trees of that size? I mean, there's a reason why communities get proactive about protecting, in particular, their older, mature, large shade trees. And we lost a lot in the ice storm. I mean, just a lot.
Would you
And-
want these folks to do it by petition?
If I may, what I would recommend for a process, and I think it's what Joe originally recommended, is we'll have the hearing with Joe as the tree warden. I'll be there just as a second witness to it, and then it'd just be permission from Joe or an overrule by the select board to say, you can, permission to cut the tree on your own expense. And that the town is not going to cover the cost based on the results of the public hearing.
Or we don't want to cut down at all, period.
I mean, we could also order that too, but I think the public hearing would be the best.
We get a chance to look at it, that's the first I'm seeing of this, and
Yeah.
it's 4 Central Tree, right?
No, there's some on Central Tree and there's some on Prospect as well.
multiple requests.
What about the one on Maple Ave I flipped you, or I sent to you? There was a citizen request on Maple Avenue, same thing, town tree touching the wires.
I was about
140.
Typically, if they're touching wires, we refer them
to
to
National Grid.
Yeah, they have
We
to
don't
do
even-
it.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
National
well-
Grid cuts around.
Well, that's what they did, that's what they complain about, is they cut a U around the wires, but they're like,
Yeah.
what the heck?
The tree itself, if it's outside of that U, because National Grid by law, has a right as the utility to remove anything that's touching the lines as a safety hazard. But that's why they'll only do the U, because they're only allowed to touch what's there.
Yeah.
The remaining portion of the tree would have to be done through this hearing process.
And how many trees do we have that are
Public shade trees.
people are requesting that the town take them?
Yeah.
Just a couple.
4.
At the present time.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah, but this is another response that we got this afternoon from legal.
Well, I mean, we have to have a hearing, so there's no point really in.
Yep.
So let's schedule the hearing. Can we do it concurrent with a board meeting?
Absolutely.
Should we just schedule it for the next meeting?
It has to be posted in the newspaper for 2 weeks. So long as that can be done, then
Well, it wouldn't,
No.
then it wouldn't be able to be
So
done.
Yeah, it'd have to be the
first
meeting.
September meeting.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, 2 meetings from now,
Yep.
we can have that hearing.
Okay. So the response to the homeowner is the board was disinclined to proactively remove the trees at town expense. And so they have to have a hearing, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
I'll, s-
Anything else?
I'll send out a primer on Chapter 87.
Great. Last thing under new business, 057, the 300th anniversary committee creation and charge approval.
You'll see on the document I did,
Doesn't even see it.
as requested at the June 6th meeting. It was requested that I draft the charge sometime in August for a September seating. So once this gets approved, we can send it out and start collecting applications for a September appointment vote.
Nice.
This would fall under the purview of open meetings, so even if someone's not appointed, these are open meetings that the public can attend.
Great.
Did we talk to the 4th of July committee?
Not yet. I
About
want to
this?
wait until we saw how this went first.
how'd you come to the 5 at-large member number?
I saw what other towns had done for their anniversary committees. Gardner, Plymouth, Westboro seem to stay around the 5 to 7 range. So since I'm listed as an ex officio, and I also put a representative from the board, that would plus the 5 is 7, and I didn't see more that were above 7.
It's just that we have probably over a dozen with the 4th of July, so if
Oh,
there's
I
more
mean-
interest in this, they might.
And there's no statutory requirement to this. This could be as big as 3 dozen if you wanted to make it that big.
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it, but it could. So there's plenty of. But my opinion on that is there's been times where we've written a draft charge just to see how many applications we got, and we got over the applications, so we amended the charge to fit it. And I
That's true.
think that's something that
I wouldn't want to turn anyone away
absolutely.
that wanted to.
Maybe the understanding we could do a minimum of 5 at-large members. We could put a maximum, to Mike's
Once we
point of.
receive. Yeah.
Sure.
Can I get a motion? Is we happy with what they're reading?
Sure.
Just for discussion too on that one, if you'll notice at the end that because for temporary committees, which this would be, we have to put when they'll dissolve. I put after full evaluation of how the planning and execution of the events actually went in there, so that we have that information if we ever go to do a big event later on as well.
400.
Sure. Yeah.
Be there.
I'll make a motion to approve the 300th anniversary committee charge. Do we want to put the amendment that it's a minimum of 5 at-large members? Just put minimum 5 at-large members.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Great. Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Right.
Aye.
We do not have any correspondence, correct?
Correct.
Is there any other business to come before the board? If not, I will take a motion for adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.